You are listening to More Than a Sniff, a weekly podcast of Western States Canine College. I'm Joe, owner and principal trainer here with my colleagues Chris, Michelle, and Shannon. Today, we are going to talk about
Amy, who is a dog trainer in Kansas, and I'll let her talk a little bit about her history and training in Kansas, and then we're going to get into kind of the culture of dog training in Kansas and how different it is there versus here in Utah, and just educate people on some different options and directions and overall dog stuff. So Amy, tell us a little bit about you and just a little bit about your history.
Hi, Joe. Great to be with you today. Thanks so much for inviting me to be here with you. I have been running my own dog training business in Kansas for about 4 years now since I moved there. I moved there from Utah and worked with you previously out here in Utah. So my business is called Kansas City Canine, and the vast majority of what I do is private lessons with people in their homes, and a little bit of walk and train sessions with dogs for people that either were working on something specific, or they work long hours, or they just need their dog exercised, or things like
that. So Amy, as you transitioned out there, what did you find the biggest challenge to be from the culture here of dogs, where we have people really want to do it themselves here? Like, it's, for the most part, where, you know, people are very actively involved with their dogs, and it's a lot of outdoor stuff with your dogs. So talk to me a little bit about the culture and kind of your transition to Kansas and training dogs and people.
That's a great question. It's been quite a bit different culturally, where what the Salt Lake Valley is here and where I live in Kansas, which is Overland Park, Leawood, Kansas, Prairie Village, Kansas. It's sort of very, very nice suburbs. Mm-hmm. And the population is quite a bit different. So most of who I'm working with are moms or families where one of the parents is a stay-at-home, or, you know, they're getting the dog for the kids, or, yeah, that's most of them. Many of the people are home with the dogs, which you would think would make them more interested in having, in working at and developing that relationship with their dogs. But I actually find it to be sort of the opposite. The other big difference between here and there culturally and in the dog population is that coming from Utah and the land of formerly No More Homeless Pets and Best Friends, and big focus on rescue and rehab and that type of thing.
Right.
I am living in the land of commercial breeding, aka puppy mills. Kansas is the number 3 state for puppy mills. Missouri is the number 1 state, and I'm right on the Kansas-Missouri line. So a huge population of the dogs that I come in contact with are not particularly well-bred dogs, which comes with its own host of challenges.
Sure.
Bad socialization in that 5-7 week old period, where you're they're coming with their own baggage long before you ever meet them.
Right.
Lots and lots of poodle mixes, Aussie poos, cockapoos, labradoodles, golden doodles, lots and lots of golden doodles. Potty training issues, crate training issues, all those things that come with dogs coming out of that negative breeding situation.
So, is it, part of me thinks, well, maybe it fits because the people are not wanting to be as actively involved, and so the dogs really don't have that association to people, and so they're kind of okay, like just being a dog and doing this, and we'll just be the people of the house. Does that make sense?
No, ask it in another way.
Where if we get a dog from a breeder, or even a rescue that does foster, right, the dog is learning to have some positive association with people, and there's that squishy interaction if we're talking about puppies, and it's super nurturing here, where we tend to get the dogs that are needy and we have anxiety, and we, you know, there's that don't leave me type mentality, to the puppy mills where they're not getting that same nurturing type environment. And so with the people, with the culture out there, they don't seem to like want to have that nurturing mentality. And so, it's interesting that wouldn't the dogs be okay in that?
Yes, if you can get them through all that ugly puppy stuff.
Okay.
Because they tend to be more mouthy, more energy management is a big challenge.
Okay.
Because again, people want the relationship when they want it, but they're not enough of my clients. The clients that put the time in and really work on developing that great relationship with their dogs are scattered enough that it's a breath of fresh air when I have that client.
Okay.
Because the majority are not. So the majority they want to get them as a cute puppy because puppies are super cute and that's why we bought it.
Right.
But then they really just want them to be a year and a half old and good and cuddly when they want to be cuddly, but don't want to necessarily put in that time and effort to get there.
Got it.
So some of the more successful training techniques there, which is not a service that I offer, are shipping the dog away because people want to, they just want to get the dog back and have it good and have it be done.
Yeah. Yeah.
And not necessarily put the time into building that relationship, which for me is a struggle because, of course, one of the things that I love about dog training and one of the reasons I do it is my own life has been so enhanced by my relationship with my dogs personally.
Right.
I want people to be able to have that same relationship with their dogs. And there just doesn't seem to be that same goal.
This is really fascinating to me. So why do you think that is? So I realize here in Salt Lake, we're very outdoorsy. We like camping, we like hiking, stuff like that. And that makes sense to me that we would want our dogs to do those things. But what is different about Kansas that makes that relationship different?
I think the other piece of it and what was quite different population-wise from what the clientele that I worked with here and the clientele I work with there is the families. And it's many, many more families in the suburbs that I'm working with who have really busy family lives. They're very active. The kids are in a bunch of different activities and they're going from activity to activity to activity. So the dogs are more of a supplement. There's some companionship for mom during the day if mom's a stay-at-home mom, or a lot of these dads work from home now. They're either road warriors where they're out on the road or they're home. So it's some companionship for them during the day, but all the kids' stuff comes first, and the dog is sort of an appendage to that as opposed to a more active member of the pack.
Interesting.
Does that make sense?
It does, but in my head, it doesn't make sense because here we take our dogs to those things. I feel like I've had a lot of clients that are like, "Oh, how do I take my dog to the soccer game? How do I socialize him enough that he can go do those things?" So why do you think that would be different there? Does that make sense?
It does make sense, and I'm not sure I know the answer to that. Some of the people do. Some of them take them. Some of them are taking them to those activities. But more of them just want them to be there and be cuddly in those moments where they want them to be there and be cuddly, and beyond that sort of.
So, Amy, earlier today, we talked a little bit, and you're working with a lot of small dogs.
Yes.
It's the mini doodles and the smaller.
Aussie poos, cockatoos.
Yeah. So you're,
Yep.
So is there, maybe that correlation or that old school thinking of the little dog stays home? You take a big dog out. And we got a little dog because the little dog stays home.
And they may go with them a lot in the car to places, but they're not necessarily getting out of the car when they're going to those places.
Okay. Because they're little and you can do that.
And a lot of these places, these big soccer complexes, you can't have your dogs there. There isn't the outdoor space necessarily to get your dogs up in the mountains and do the hiking and do the trails up Mill Creek Canyon and all that cool stuff that we can do here. There are dog parks. There are maybe 5 of them. in the county that I'm in. So even that is about the only outdoor stuff that they're getting, other than, if the people are walking and doing the strollers and taking their daily walks and all that stuff. So they're getting out in that sense, but they're not necessarily coming along on family activities. It's more house focused.
Yeah. So what's the overall expectations of the dogs then?
Sadly low.
Yeah.
Most people are happy if, and this, much of the time we're being called when some event has triggered the need to eventually get the dog training in the house, like grandma got knocked over, or the neighborhood kid got bitten, or something like that. So to people's credit, they want to do well by their dogs initially, but again, they get some successes up front, and the dog is no longer jumping on grandma and can handle being at the family picnic and will sit when they ask them to sit, and that's pretty much where they're content to let it lay. And I find that, of course, that's rewarding when you get the dog that it's more welcome to be a part of family events and more appropriate behaved in all those types of situations. But I find it sad that people don't want to necessarily put in the work to develop a dog's full potential, to really give them purpose in their family.
So if they come that way, great. If they don't,
they're good enough.
Yeah.
Yeah.
We just won't take them to those places.
Correct.
So talk to me a little bit about the culture of, the rescues versus the puppy mill dogs.
Yeah. There are some rescues there that do a good job. There are a few of them. There are a few that are not quite as good, where they're basically just trying to pull some dogs out of there. You know how here we would sometimes get, so the rescue population in Utah, at least when I was living here, was mostly larger dogs. So sometimes they would pull smaller dogs like up from California and move them up here to get them adopted out here. There seems to be some of that in that part of the world, but they're pulling them up from like Mississippi, Louisiana, Arkansas. A lot of those dogs are pulled up. So you do get some of that hound dog population, coon dogs, a little bit of that.
Yeah.
But the other part that I haven't mentioned on this is, so I'm right on the Kansas-Missouri line. Where I live has breed-specific legislation. So again, you're missing many of those bully breeds. The Utah population, there seems to be a lot of pit bull, blood in the population here, or in mixes. There's none of that on the Kansas side, but there's quite a bit of that on the Missouri side. So it really depends where you are located, what the dog population is. And it's drastically different. On the Kansas side, it's all the little cute poodle mixes. And then on the Missouri side, you get a lot more of the rescue mentality.
Interesting. Yeah.
And bigger dog population.
Got it.
I'm just wondering, what are the rescues doing to help with like the puppy mill situation that's going on?
Not nearly enough. Not nearly enough, not nearly enough, not nearly enough. And I fight that battle quite a bit. There are a couple of different groups that I'm involved with that have annual auctions. So, Lordy, again, there are, I want to say I know 4 or 5 different dogs I've worked with in the last couple of years that were the auction dogs. So get the cute puppy, auction it off. And one of these groups, I've been fighting the battle 3 years. I finally got them this year, Yahoo, to not offer a puppy for adoption. But those are, again, cheaply offered, purchased puppies from absolutely puppy mill situations. There is a little bit of effort by one of the larger rescue groups to try to fight a little bit, but there has not been a lot of success in the time that I've been there. Because again, Missouri is the #1 state, and it's so easy for people that do that commercial breeding. They just change their name. They move to another location. There's one group of, politely calling them commercial breeders in Missouri, that I know of, where they have gotten together and built a very pretty, nice building at the front of somebody's property that they share that space almost as storefront. So when they're meeting new clients, for the rare, there are lots of, I've learned all the different triggers of what commercial breeding is. So buyer beware on this one for those people out there. If the breeder offers to meet you part way, if the breeder says, oh, I'm coming up there anyway, let me bring the dog to you. Even if you insist on going there, if you don't meet the dam and sire or either one of them, or if they say, oh, they're out in the back, or oh, they're in the house, if there are multiple breeds of dogs there. So most breeders are breeding one, maybe two types of breeds on property. If you get 4 or more, you're in a commercial breeding situation. The biggest trigger around there is people bringing the dogs to them. But even for those people who insist on going and meeting a breeder, these breeders have figured out a way to put up a pretty storefront in the front of their property so you look like you're getting a legitimate type of dog when they're just sharing that space among the 3 of them to have a nice place to transfer a commercially bred dog.
Oh, fascinating.
It's depressing.
It's crazy.
Yeah.
It's insane. I think it's really good for people here even to know stuff like that. 'Cause
Yeah.
it definitely still happens. So
what are your clients' response like? Do they know? Like when you talk about it, you say, some of them know and have an idea and they're totally fine with it, versus the people that are like, really, like that happens. How do they deal with it?
It's sort of all over the map. Some people have. Some people just don't care. They picked out, they go into the pet stores, they go in and visit with the kids, they look at the puppies, and then one day on a whim they buy one. And one of my questions on consultations is why this particular dog, and because it was cute is an answer I've received many times. Which for anybody listening, if you don't already know, this is a really bad reason to buy a dog.
Yeah.
Some people just don't care.
Mm-hmm.
Some people, it's just there hasn't been enough education and they just don't know.
Mm-hmm.
Some people who do take the time to ask a few questions at the pet store can be given misleading information. For instance, one of the chains that sells these dogs, their standard response is, it's a little old lady outside of a particular town, which is a legitimate response. What isn't mentioned is that she has over 500 dogs on her property. And her dogs are always given a particular name, so they're really easy to spot when you do ask to see the paperwork, which I ask to see a lot. Some of the people have sort of figured it out, and when they do figure it out, they're not happy with the fact that that's what they've got. But the really sad piece of this, and the reason that these guys are still in business, is that number one, resilience to the brilliance of dogs. Most of them do well anyway.
Yeah.
Right?
Yep.
So there are special challenges that you get with some of the dogs, and a very small percentage of the dogs don't recover from that breeding background and never get potty trained, or things like that. Crate anxieties, that's another common one.
Mm-hmm.
But lost my train of thought. So some of the people have figured it out, and at that point, they're committed to the dog to their credit. On the very rare occasions where they just become really angry, like I had one person and their dog just had severe dysplasia and was 7 months old and was going to have a much less, this was a larger dog, it was a golden retriever. They were hoping for an active life with their dog, and a dog that was going to accompany them camping and boating and all these other things. And this dog wasn't going to be capable of doing it. And they became very angry with it and went after the store. I don't know if they've had success with that. That was a couple of months ago, on trying to get the money back. So it's kind of all over the map. But I think the really sad piece of it is that these places that are selling these puppies count on the fact that by the time you figure out what you've got and what the challenges are, you're emotionally bought in, and or your kids are definitely emotionally bought in and are not going to allow you to get rid of the dogs. So you just figure out how to adjust your life around it. But, people are... the ones that never figure out potty training are going to have I know a 12-year-old Yorkie that's been wearing a diaper his whole life, and that's just how they manage it.
It's crazy.
Yeah.
So here we do have, really is adoption is kind of our thing, but we do have some really great breeders as well. And being somebody that I am more on the breeder side of things, I mean, do you have good breeders there, and what are their response to this?
Absolutely, there are good breeders there, and they, I don't know from a legal level how it is they're trying to go. I know there are some lobbying groups that are supporting the commercially bred dogs that work hard in the legislatures to keep it legal. It feels like, especially on the Missouri side, sometimes they'll have some successes and then the legislature will change and it'll backslide a little bit. There are absolutely legitimate breeders. I keep track of the names when I get clients who get dogs from good breeders, and I meet nice dogs. I will keep the names of those breeders so that hopefully if people are asking me ahead of time before they've gotten the dog, I can steer them in a good direction.
Nice.
Yeah.
Shannon, do you have questions?
Well, I'm just curious if somebody comes to you for help to select a dog, because I feel like we get that a lot. We're all about matching the right person with the right dog, and we have a lot of avenues of how to get a dog in their house. How do you compete with the idea that they should just go to the pet store and get a dog when they don't know really how many options there are? Or are there really not that many options available in your area?
There are plenty of options. There are plenty of breeders within, a 5-hour radius of us. So I feel like there are lots and lots of options out there. It's mostly breaking the mentality and convincing people that the amount of money that they're spending on these dogs is because they're extraordinarily expensive. I mean, for crying out loud, they do payment plans on them at this one chain store like you're buying furniture. And so you end up locked in at this high interest rate, making your payments for the next 2 years on this really badly bred dog. It's, yeah. Absolutely. Financing available. Kid you not. Yeah. So really the angle that I go in those situations is trying to convince people that A, they're spending too much money for those dogs in the first place, and B, you can get so much further spending that money on the training once you've gotten a dog that you spent less money on and developing it to its full potential and putting the money that direction versus the other direction. Because some of these people, again, getting these challenges of these badly bred dogs, then really need training and can't afford it because they're making their payments. Right? So they don't have enough left over, and they do a really good job, these stores, of packaging your vet care in with it and your supplies in with it. So the physical needs, allegedly, are being met of this dog, but then you don't have enough resources left over to take care of the problems that they're coming with.
Maybe that's what we should do. We'll just go and get a rescue and finance. You can get training. You can get all your crate, your toys, your food, wow. I don't know. I had a client here. She's got a doodle, and we don't call them poodle mixes here. We call them doodles.
Yep.
I'm just kidding.
Yep.
And she was really, we've had to take a different approach with her dog, training wise, because poorly bred, got some challenges, and she asked me, she says, why don't you do something? And I, my response to her is, well, one person isn't going to change the world in what's happening because people continue to purchase them. And as much as there's the puppy mills happening back there's doodle breeders coming out of nowhere here. And maybe it's the influence of brokers here that are working for these puppy mills back east that people don't even realize that's going on. Or there's so much money to be made in this breeding of dogs because we're so willing to pay that much that I I don't know how I would, as one person, I don't want people to think that I hate doodles and that, well, don't go there because they're not going to train your doodle, because we're about getting the dog trained, whatever you have and whatever you've selected. And so it's kind of this catch-22 as a dog trainer, that you want to educate and you want to help people understand. But one, how do you do that to the masses? And two, it's not that we don't want to train your dog.
Right.
And so people can perceive that. It's like, well, if you don't like pit bulls, then you must not like training them. Kind of, you have to,
Right.
It's a very sensitive thing as a dog trainer is, we want to train, we want to help you be successful and have a relationship no matter what the breed
Right.
is. But we also feel like there's such miscommunication and uneducated people out there as it relates to dogs.
Yep.
And it's challenging.
And again, to my earlier point on the brilliance of dogs, I mean, one of the satisfying things is, despite culturally what I'm dealing with training there and how drastically different that is from here, the brilliance of dogs is that most of them do great anyway.
Yeah.
And that for me is the satisfaction in being able to take one of those creatures that's coming out of that difficult situation,
Right.
and still turn them into a great family pet.
Yeah.
And so at the end of the day, most of what I'm doing is working with people individually, one-on-one with their dogs in their homes. And if I can get that to be successful, then while it's still a dog from a commercially bred situation that's coming from a tough background, and unfortunately we have supported that, it's come out with a positive ending for the dog.
Yeah.
At the end of the day.
Yeah.
Which, if the dog is returned, if the dog goes back to the store, if the dog ends up in the rescue situation, maybe it ends up being a positive situation for the dog, and maybe it doesn't. So it really speaks to the brilliance of dogs, but again, that makes it a challenge in trying to address that and trying to get people better educated on it. I do my best. Joe, you asked earlier about what people's responses to that is.
Mm-hmm.
And for about the first year, I wouldn't tell people.
Mm-hmm.
And then I ran into enough of them and got frustrated enough with it that I started deciding. I asked about a half a dozen clients in a row when I figured out that's where their dogs were from, and said, okay, if it's possible that your dog came from this particular background situation, which in your case matters because of this particular challenge that we're having, do you want to know? Do you really legitimately want to know? And some of them do, and
Yeah.
some of them don't.
Yeah.
So now I figured out a way to say it. I just say commercially bred, and those who are savvy enough to figure out what I'm saying and interested enough to ask more questions do, and those who don't. But I've still thrown it out there, so what they choose to do with that information is theirs. I do feel safe in saying that the majority, never say all, but
Mm-hmm.
I feel like the great majority of people who I've worked with who have dogs from that situation, in the very least, will never get another one from that type of situation. So that's a victory, and are hopefully educating those around them. So that's a victory. And that's the best I can do.
Yeah. Yeah. And it's challenging because, that is, the dogs are resilient, and we can make it successful if the people will give us a chance to do it and be willing to do it. So it is challenging for sure. And I think that you're taking the right approach. And our Mitt was a puppy mill dog from back east and purchased in a warehouse, and somewhere that was okay for, the family here. And he had house training issues, but we knew that and knew how we needed to manage it. But it sure helps with training, knowing where they come from, because then it makes sense and
Absolutely.
You can help success happen to some extent.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Do you have any more questions, Shannon? Amy, what advice would you give anybody out there that's listening, as far as from a dog trainer and experiencing Utah, where we're kind of spoiled here,
Right.
to where you're at?
Well, I'm actually giving a presentation in about 3 weeks on how to select, back to your comment earlier, Shannon, on how to select a great dog for the family. And I think the biggest thing, and I feel like many of the clientele out here in Utah do this ahead of time. I don't feel like as many of the people where I'm living currently do this, is realize the time commitment. This is a 15 to 20, if we're lucky, 10 to 20 year commitment on getting this new dog. Put the time and the effort and the research in up front, like you would on buying a car, like you would on buying an appliance for your home. Which brings up, another interesting point. I don't know how much is more of the throwaway culture, and that things come and go so much more easily in our lives, and we don't buy things for the long haul like we used to.
Sure.
Things just aren't as well made, and they don't last as long, and you don't look at purchases as being in there for the long haul. But look at it in the long haul. Consider your lifestyle. If you are, a 70-year-old retiree, man, a Weimar isn't the dog for you.
Right.
If you are a full-time working family, getting an 8-week-old puppy where you need to get through potty training is just not going to work for you. You need to think these things through. If you're going to get a dog that's, I have a Vizsla that has energy management is a huge challenge with many of the dogs I work with. And it's because that angle of it isn't considered ahead of time with purchasing a dog. They're going for the cuteness. They're going for the hypoallergenic. They're not necessarily thinking energy levels of the dogs. An Aussie poo may be hypoallergenic, but it's still got Aussie, and you still need to exercise the daylights out of your dog, and you have to have a plan for that. So I think it's just think ahead of time when you're getting a dog. If you have other dogs in the family, let them be a part of that decision process. Let them be a part of selecting a dog so that it works for your whole family and your pack, and it enhances your pack versus causing your pack to go into disruption and chaos mode.
Nice.
Yeah.
Nice. You have anything else, Michelle? Shannon? Okay. Amy, it's fun, and thank you so much, and we hope to have you back.
Thanks for having me today.
Thanks.
Thank you for listening. If you want to know more about us and our services, please visit our website at www.wsk9co.com. And as always, we urge you to get out and train.